Thank you, Jen, and to the last panel for the excellent discussion. My name is Melissa Harris, and I'm a staff writer with GovernmentCIO Media Research. I'm happy now to introduce this next discussion of brilliant leaders in the IT space with our CIO Spotlight. With us today is Dorothy Aronson, the CIO and now CDO of the National Science Foundation. She's been a great leader in the federal IT space, so I'm so happy she's with us today. And also with us is Helen Jang, Senior Director of AI and Technology Initiatives at RTI International, which is an independent nonprofit that provides IT research, services, and more for government and commercial clients globally. So thank you both for being with me today. So I just want to kick things off by sort of going to, since you're both leaders in the IT space, you have the opportunity to make important decisions that will make an impact on your organization's modernization journey and mission. So can you start by explaining where you are on, I guess in Dorothy, your case, your agency, and Helen, with you, your organization's modernization journeys, and what it's been like to lead throughout that process?
Well, I'd be happy to start. It's okay with you, Helen?
Please.
It works for you? Okay, good.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. So at the National Science Foundation, we've had an approach of continuous modernization for a while, for over 5 years. It really started when we had legacy infrastructure that was aging, and we realized that we were investing that we couldn't get customer engagement in changing the interfaces to our systems, but we knew that the legacy systems were aging and had to be replaced. So we really started our modernization journey by replacing the infrastructure that and the invisibly to the customer. We changed the overlaying, the underlying components, the opposite of what I was saying. And so then we began to, meanwhile, at the same time, we began to talk to customers and gain their buy-in and implement strong practices that allowed us to hear from them. And then once they started sharing their information with us and their needs with us, we could then begin to evolve the IT in such a way that customers could take advantage of the new and evolving capabilities in IT. I just want to say one other thing before I hand this over to Helen, which is that there was a really important turning point after our legacy infrastructure was updated, where we became liberated, where we became able to invest in the skin on top of the systems without worrying as much about security. And as we move forward and modernize now in the past 3 years, since we've been really pretty stable in the infrastructure, we have not had to worry about focus so much on security or because we've been keeping out all of our licensed equipment and such up to date. So that's been a really important change for us. Helen?
Great. So as you can imagine, RTI being we do a lot of work for government agencies. So we pay attention to what's going on there, and we look at, well, what can we do to really improve our capabilities to serve our clients? So from a tech modernization journey, we look at it from 3 perspectives. As an organization, what do we need to do to make sure that our business operations are modernized, that we're moving from legacy systems, that we can do efficient billing, we can do, all that stuff. So that's been underway. From the research services side, we look at it from 2 different perspectives. The initiative that I'm leading, that we started about 3 years ago, looks at, well, how can we apply emerging technologies and take advantage of them to improve efficiencies, to make sure that we're flexible, to make sure that we can meet the needs that we're hearing from our clients. So the 3 things that I've been working on is, how can we build a platform that enables a full scale of AI and just data work? And that means having a secure platform, having reusable assets, and then having staff who actually know how to use the tools. So that's a 3-pronged approach. And all of that has to be in a secure environment, right? A FIPS and compliant environment. So we're going through the process and making sure we're in FIPS low, FIPS mod, and moving through that. And also, as we're listening to trends that are happening with multi-cloud, making sure that we can be portable. So that from how do we serve our research services needs. Now, there's all this that we've heard about, data modernization. And that is another initiative that is being planned and underway, trying to understand the needs of our clients, talking to the different stakeholders, and then designing an initiative that's going to allow us to meet those needs. And, even within our organization, trying to understand what is a common definition of data modernization, and so that we can also articulate and get feedback from our clients. And for us, it's really the movement of data enabled by technology to drive results in support of decision-making or effective mission implement throughout the life cycle. I think that's really critical, because if we can't be ready to, provide what our federal agency clients need, then that's not, that doesn't help us or help us serve our mission, which is improving the human condition by helping to solve critical problems, whether it's, in education or health or in agriculture. All of that is critical. So so it's really about multiple approaches, but really breaking them into smaller chunks so we can actually implement them.
Certainly. And that point on data modernization is something that I know a lot of CIOs are really focusing on. Dorothy, as you were talking about just then, you've really built up the IT maturity at your agency, but, you're really focusing on getting organization and structure around data. So can you go into a little bit about what your priorities have been around data, getting to that modernization around it, and how you're trying to make it more actionable for your agency?
Thank you, Melissa. So yes, the most important thing, people want information from data. And we have a lot of data, but it's been collected over many, many years. And so it's not consistent over time. The format of the data isn't consistent over time. So people want to ask questions like, how many females provided funding to the National Science Foundation, or what's the ratio of females to males? And it's very hard to answer that question, because the way we've captured information about people has changed dramatically. So we can't really, so people wish, they imagine that we should have that information, and it's really hard, it's hard to do that. So what we've been doing, the real work in data, I think, is for the first step, taking the data you have and figuring out exactly what it is. And that's really much harder than you can imagine. It's not, because people are using this data today to do their everyday jobs. Whether it's complete and accurate or not, it's still being used, and people base their decisions on it. So the first step is just to make sure they understand what they're using, so that when they go in and grab some information from a data repository or a quick report, that they know what they're looking at, from which source it comes, and how accurate and complete is it. So for example, how many people actually filled out this, of the 100 people that you wanted responses from, did you get 5 or did you get 50? So how important is the conclusion that you're drawing from this? And so all of that work in understanding each bit of data, we are folding that under, we're building something called an enterprise data inventory that should contain all that historic information about the data. But it starts with programmers looking at code. It goes to people who are experts at the business, reviewing what the coders believe is happening, and then it takes a formal approval process in order to publish that enterprise data inventory information. So it's a lot of work. Meanwhile, as I mentioned, people are working every day with that data, whether or not they know what they're using. So it's always, in my world, it's thrilling actually to be, changing out a broken part in an airplane while it's flying. That's what my world is like. And so that, so the EDI is part of our data, but there's really, and we're publishing policies, and I put that in air quotes because I'm not a rule follower. we're writing down what we think people should be doing and thinking and worrying about. And our data quality policy right now really has 3 prongs. It talks about the input data, which is the data I was just talking about. It talks about the tools you use on top of that data. So is this tool correct? Does this algorithm, do you really understand what it's doing in a way? Are you using it correctly the way it was intended to be used? So there's the input data, the tools, and then the process you use in merging the input data and the tool to get to the output, to the analytics result. So an executive, like the director of the agency, might get a document with a chart in it, and he has to know that all 3 of those components were done properly, and so that he could go out in public and make a statement that will then appear to be correct the next time someone asks the same question. And so it's really insane, the level, and then people throw conversations in like, well, what's the value? So in the tools section, there's a subcomponent, which is artificial intelligence. And so then you think that gets into a whole nother realm that's still evolving, really. And it's just thrilling. I mean, one thing I really like about the National Science Foundation is that because we took time to modernize the low-hanging fruit years ago, we're able to push forward aggressively on some of these other items like data. Is that a helpful answer? What more?
Yeah, definitely. I also just hearing from you, it definitely sounds like there are many different steps, and you have been building up your enterprise to be able to get to this point. And Helen, I sort of want to pick your brain too, because as you were talking about before, you have a lot of hats that you wear. Your team, or teams, I should say, do a lot of different work. So just from, the agencies you've worked with and the projects you've worked with, what are some of the key elements that you found most useful or beneficial to realizing technological change, whether it's, with the data modernization that Dorothy was talking about or otherwise?
I think the first thing is really truly understanding the problem that you're trying to solve. And that means getting the stakeholders that you're working with to agree with you that this is a problem that we're going to focus on, and this is how we're going to measure it, right? So sharing a common understanding. In terms of realizing technical change, it all comes down to people and understanding the constraints. If this government agency is committed to a certain technology stack, there are reasons why you have to stick with that. Whereas this other agency is really excited about using new technologies and wants you to help them figure out how to implement that technology. That's a different type of person. But in helping to realize the benefit of technology change, I think what's been helpful is presenting evidence for if you were able to do it this way, and you'd gather evidence through a proof of concept to say, look, this is what it used to take you to manually code these, like say, data variables to make sure that they are the same thing. Versus if you applied machine learning, it's going to save you X amount of time. You're going to get better quality, and you're going to free up time for your team to be able to do higher level work. So really understanding how to articulate the benefits, but it's also understanding what they care about in terms of the initiatives. But the other thing, of course, is you have to co-design the proof of concept. It gets back to the problem that they care about, the way that you're trying to solve it together makes sense to them, and then also providing the tools that allow them to do the work, and then providing support. So, for example, we had one team that works with FDA and other state agencies looking at tobacco use. And they have like 137 surveys, and they do social media recruitment for their surveys. And these are quick turnaround things like, 3 days or a week. And so they have to make sure, and they also provide an incentive, like there's like a $10 incentive for people to take this. And because of the short time frame, they need to know if somebody's trying to game the system by trying to do it multiple times to get the incentive. So what we worked with them is we built a knowledge graph that allowed them to pull together information about their study, about their respondents, about different patterns, so that they could identify fraud and then kick people out and not accept them into the study. Because otherwise, that's going to to really quote, mess up your data for your study, which is a quick turnaround time. But what we also did with that is understand where these people are at and that they could implement a lot of it themselves. And what they needed from us were the tools and the higher level planning and support to help them implement. So that's one example of how we've worked with a team to realize the benefit of technology, but then also they in turn can then convey that to their clients.
Right. And, you know, you were sort of touching upon a little bit there about, you know, communicating and getting buy-in and, you know, just to be able to get buy-in for whatever solutions you're trying to get requires communication. So knowing, you know, how to put the case for a certain solution there, or knowing the client problem so that you can apply the proper tools. A lot of it's data governance, cybersecurity, weaving it all in really smoothly. So, you know, to the both of you as leaders in IT, how have you navigated these conversations with customers or stakeholders to make meaningful modernization change or to bring solutions to the table? Dorothy, do you want to start?
Sure. So the job of the CIO is to bring, in my view, is to bring technology and business together as partners to solve problems. And I know this is a women tilted audience, so I will say I think that women are better collaborators by nature than those other people, so men. And no, I love men, but you know how they are. So I think that you know, technology people don't know what to do with the technology. They know what the technology is capable of, but most of the people I work with come to the table from the technology side because they love the tool. They love the puzzle of creating a solution. And they don't really, they need the business people. They don't always know they do. Sometimes they think they have a better solution without talking to business people, but that's not true. And business people have the opposite problem. Business people understand the legacy tools. And so when they go to solve problems, their imagining always starts with, and maybe ends with, the as is. So they'll say, well, we know we need to do something new. It looks just like, in my mind, it looks just like this thing I have been using. So why don't we just duplicate that? And in reality, the right solution isn't to duplicate it, but to do something differently. And it's the combination of people who can imagine what's different with those people who have problems to solve. And that is how you get to excellence. You know, so how do you have those conversations? I think it's really important that the people at the table, and I really think there's really three groups now emerging. There's the technology people, there are the data people, and then there's the people with business acumen, with the knowledge of the business. And without any of those three prongs, I don't think you can have a decent result, an effective result. And so how do you bring them to the table? You just tell them you can't live without them. I mean, that's one way. or you refuse. So, I mean, for example, when I mentioned how we started out to modernize, we couldn't get people to the table. So we did what we could do. We did the underlying technology, but that only takes you so far. At a certain point, you have to, as a technologist, say, no, I'm not going to go forward. I can't go forward without the input from these other areas.
Yeah, Helen, did you want to add to that?
Yes, absolutely. I agree with Dorothy. It is so critical to have a diverse team with all these different voices, because it's, you know, that's the only way you're going to get buy-in. I would add to what Dorothy is saying by also focusing on communication and knowing your audience, because there are people who want all the details and there are other people who don't want the details. And if you start giving them all the details, they are not going to listen. You're going to lose them, right? And then the other thing I would say is market research. And sometimes that really does help by helping you to convince the people who are a little hesitant that,
Right.
look, this is where the market is going, and we really need to go there, and I need you to go there with me. How can we make this happen? And I talk about that from the perspective of somebody who's a champion for technology, trying to get my initiatives funded, trying to get our our clients to also see the direction where we could help them and where things can go. And with that, it's really being able to articulate, this is where you are and this is where you want to be, or we want to go with you. And it's going to take a while to get there. But let's start planning that, because people get really excited about AI. They think, oh, it's going to change everything. But what does that mean about my job security? What does that mean about, my work in general? And you think, well, look, we're not going to go from computers ruling the world right away. It's really about moving from manual work that you don't even want to do to having AI help you with it, to then eventually having humans help AI do the work. It's not going to be humans are out of the loop, but alleviating some of that fear will get buy-in, but it's also understanding, what the concerns are so you can address them.
Right.
Can I add to that? I agree.
Of course.
I think using fear is a double-edged sword. It works against us and we can use it to work for us. So I think that because fear is a great motivator, and it can motivate some people to want to stay just where they are. Mm-hmm. And so we have to be aware of that type of fear, and sometimes leadership's in that position, so when you go to leadership and you say, I understand you're afraid to move forward, but maybe you should be afraid to stay where you are, because technology isn't standing still. So I think of technology, it used to be like every 5 years you would need a new, first off, you didn't have a laptop when I was a kid or whatever, but it got to be, you had them every 3 years, 5 years, 3 years, there's real-time downloads happening to our operating systems all the time. It's continuous. And that modernization happens. So if you disconnect from a world that's continuously modernized, you're behind instantly. Mm-hmm. And so leadership has to understand that. And that's so it is fear. It in some cases, you have to encourage fear. The other thing I think is that I've had two experiences where I think that, and AI has the same power. AI is exactly a good example of a thing people fear and other people love. Mm-hmm. And again, this comes in my mind to my belief that we're not going to be perfect. We're never going to be perfect. The AI is never going to be fully understood. It's never going to be fully developed because we're going really fast. So one of the ways I think about it is it better? Is using this tool better than what you were using before or not better? If it's better, even though it's perfect, go ahead and use it. I would recommend using it. It's like these mapping things that we use. There's different ones to choose from. They would give you different options for going forward. Is there one that's right? There's probably a best one. Do I always take the best one? I don't know. So I think that understanding that there is risk and that risk isn't going away is kind of an important part of my approach to getting buy-in.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And also just, we've talked a little bit with you, Dorothy, about, the different modernization steps you're taking, but, as you were saying, we are continuously moving into the future and everything's moving so fast. So, given the role that IT has sort of gotten this year with telework, with the pandemic, and then also with all these like major cybersecurity threats we've been seeing, I think, we're at a point where we can really push to ask for those things and really incorporate the change we need to deliver our mission better. So given that we're at this point, what do you as a CIO sort of see as some of the most critical modernization steps that agencies overall, not just NSF, should be taking to prepare for the future?
Do you want to start with that, Helen, or do you want me to go?
I think, why don't you go, because it's about agency priorities.
Okay. And everyone's dying to hear that.
Yeah.
So what do I think about the path forward maybe in modernization and how to use modernization to advance the mission given the current situation? I think that the answer is, well, what I see happening, or what I hope to have see what I hope to happen is that IT has become integrated into everything we do. I mean, clearly with the pandemic, it's, we wouldn't be here today with each other, right? So I think that we have to acknowledge that the IT budget and the IT professionals are not the only ones doing IT. And so one of the things I really love to imagine is that IT solutions should be in the hands of the end user. So, and that the IT professionals and the IT budget should focus on a strong infrastructure that everyone can build on. And I think the simplest example is something like Excel, Microsoft Excel, not to promote Microsoft, but just, so, that's a very powerful tool, and it allows people to do a lot of things. Sometimes they're done right, sometimes they're not done right, it doesn't matter. It's a computer tool that end users have adopted and wrapped into their, they use it like a pencil, right? So in the future, I hope that there's other tools like that, like robotic process automation tools that end users can say, oh, every day I do these 5 steps over and over and over. And I just think I'm gonna tell my robot friend over here to do that instead. And the same way with data and analytics. I think that if we can get the central components to be sound and well understood and simple, then data scientists aren't always going to be needed to produce the output that people need in order to make decisions. And so those are all kind of my hopes in how we drive this, how we race into the future with everybody else,
That's so true.
Can I jump in here for a little bit? I absolutely agree with you. I think AutoML libraries, natural language processing libraries, there are so many of them out there, and it doesn't take it's not the barrier to entry to doing that work is reduced. And it's really about getting some skill sets and being able to extend and expand the skill sets of our workforce, right? So that the data science methods are available to a broader audience, which is not to say that they're not needed. Of course, they're going to be needed for really complex things. But just like your example of Excel, we can do spreadsheets, we can do budgets. It doesn't have to be in the hands of finance. So I think empowering staff to be able to take up technology is critical.
For sure. And I just have a couple more questions here as we sort of get toward the end of things. And this is we've been talking about the technology, but this is about women tech leaders. So just from this sort of leadership perspective that we have the advantage to talk about today, what kind of benefits have you seen in federal IT modernization by being more inclusive to not just women, but also to people of different races or ages or disabilities?
So I believe that inclusion of all kinds of ideas, ways of thinking and being are critical, because the customers we serve are all kinds of people, and that's one reason. But also, it's amazing how different people are, surprising in how incredibly complex they are, each person, and different. And I think that we are selling ourselves short if we don't take advantage of all the fabulous thinking that's going on around us. So I believe in that. And I think that some people talk about it and want to believe it, but I've seen it in action. I've seen people from all different walks of life come into organizations where we're all strangers and, find love and, enjoy in working together and you learn twice as much from a person who doesn't know what, who you teach and learn simultaneously. It's just great.
I think it's critical. You look at just machine learning data, bias is there. Who's really paying attention to that, right? A wide audience, because it matters. For women, it matters. And not that it doesn't matter for other people, but also you look at different ages, right? How different earlier career staff right out of college, they use technology differently than more senior staff. So you try to figure out, if you're going to have a solution, how do you blend really more new concepts with tried and true to build a solution that's going to work across the spectrum. And I think that that's critical. And so I absolutely agree with Dorothy. I think the inclusion of as many different types of voices is critical. And, you know, through human-centered design, you do that by creating different profiles, right? But then you want to have those voices in the room with you, as well as you're sharing different ideas to get the feedback that you need to refine your concepts before you implement.
Fantastic. I agree. And I want to thank you, Melissa, for introducing me, Helen.
Oh, and I'll say the same. I'm really enjoying this conversation.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we're all out of time, unfortunately, for this panel, but, you know, so happy to have the two of you here and to have this wonderful discussion. So thank you for your insight and leadership. And now I'd like to pass the program over to my colleague, Mega, who will be leading another excellent session with Dr. Marie Bernard from NIH.